good stuff, man. It's really good stuff. Really good
Appreciate
stuff.
that.
And the relationships, it was really interesting for me, the relationships you made along the way. So I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. I've had the privilege of interviewing Special Operations Forces and Marines. I even interviewed a Major General who was in the Iraq War, Major General John Gronsky, and just a month ago. And boy, I'll tell you what, your stories and the things that you guys talk about are just so parallel. As a matter of fact, I interviewed Command Sergeant Major Tom Satterley, who was in the 18-hour firefight in Mogadishu as a Delta Force.
I thought I recognized that name, yeah.
Yeah, as a Delta Force guy. And he well, I'll tell you what, some of your guys' stories, just, man, just amazing.
No, I bet Satterley has a heck of a lot of them.
Oh, he does. Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
He does have, he has quite a few, but so the hat is his foundation called All Secure. And so my wife and I financially and publicly and verbally support the foundation to help our combat vets with PTS. And I don't believe in the disorder part because it just comes with the territory, sadly.
Sure.
And so this is part of supporting him and his foundation with him and his wife, and they do a great job and just try to help out as many of you guys as we can, and because we're grateful, we stand here grateful, and I am, and so I want to make sure that I am, first of all, just to say thank you for your service, and thank you for your stories, and thank you for enlightening us with the realities of what all that is, because that's just so thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Let me see here.
Yeah, whenever you're ready, Jay, you just tell me.
Yeah, well, I need to pull up, I'm trying to pull up the Kindle reader, because, I have the book on Kindle. And so I'm trying to get to Jared's stuff here so that I can make sure that I've got all my notes all together as well. All right, and then James, how long do you want this interview to go?
Well, I think we're doing at least 30 minutes. Isn't that right, Jared?
Okay.
I think we've got you.
Is that what you got?
Yeah, 30 minutes is what I was told.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Hold on here. Let me get one last thing. Jared, this is your first book?
It is, yes.
You got more in your head?
Oh, a few.
Well, here's the thing. Because you read so much as a kid, right? And I read your story about struggling with school and everything like that. But when you read as much as you were reading, you have to be a great writer, and clearly it shows in this book.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah. I mean, I think I read that stuff I was more interested in reading that, I think, for just the stories that I was being told about it. That said, though, I did a lot of sketches, writing little scenes and stuff like that, even as a teenager, I guess, maybe in the thought that I might do something with it. It wasn't until later on that right about the time I left high school was about the time I started thinking about, maybe I could write professionally at some point.
Yeah. Well, dude, listen, I'm just telling you, brother, that they're great. Really great writing. Great writing.
Thanks.
All right, James, I am ready when you are. So I can
we have
get us
got
through this.
a great show today, and IQ Al Rizzoli is our regular co-host, and he is out today because he is He is venturing from the United Kingdom to the United States. He finally got his green card, so he's over here legally. And I asked the fantastic internet doctor himself, the host of New Direction with Jay Izzo, the aforementioned Mr. Jay Izzo, to join us today. And he is going to help us fill in with IQ. And we have got a great guest with us today. The book is Volunteers, Growing Up in a Forever War. Jerad W. Alexander joins us today via the magic of the old skip Skype. Yes, the old Skyper, Rooney. And thanks for joining us here on iHeartRadio and 50-plus AM/FM stations across the country and around the world. And Jay, welcome back to the program. How are you, sir?
I am well. Thank you so much. It's great to be back on the Jiggy Jaguar show. And by the way, I need to say this. Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have the Jiggy Jaguar app, because friends do not let friends not have the Jiggy Jaguar app on their phone, because that is where you're going to get the best information, the best interviews. That is where you're going to hear it's great stuff like you can hear today with Jerad W. Alexander, because the book is outstanding.
So, Jerad, tell me and Jay a little bit about this book. When I asked Jay to fill in for IQ today, he immediately told me, I just bought the book. I cannot wait to read this. And within like 2 days, he got a hold of me and he goes, well, I read the book twice. I'm ready to go. So.
Wow, that's impressive. Well, nicely done. So the book is about, as the title sort of suggests, it's about kind of growing up in and around war in general terms. I mean, I was a child of the military. I grew up on Air Force bases predominantly, and then the book kind of goes into what that looks like and what it feels like to be in that environment. And then eventually I go on to enlist in the Marine Corps as an infantryman and a combat correspondent. And all those sort of ideas that I had as a kid about war sort of unravel in that space. And so the book just sort of it's got a bit of a two-headed plot to it, and that on the one hand it's my just upbringing, and then enlisting in the Marine Corps and going through the my time in the military, and then the other bit of that is my experience in the Iraq War itself, which was sort of the goal that I had for myself, is participating in something akin to that, which is what I'd been reading about, or things like that I'd been reading about as a teenager, like Vietnam, World War II, and Korea, and Desert Storm. And so, and it kind of comes together at a sort of crucial point in my time overseas, and then sort of dumps the reader out the back end with the sort of wisdom of the whole thing. That's sort of the basics of the book, but it covers a little bit of other subjects too, as like a little bit of masculinity in there, and hero worship and that sort of thing.
Well, I'd like to just dig into it, because I love the book. And so I want to just dig into it, and I want to give people some of the flavor of this book, because let's just start it out. You give us the background. You have this mom who was in the Air Force. I believe she was in the Air Force. And
that's right.
You had a grandfather, Don, who was also in the military. And then you have two dads. You've got a stepdad by the name of Alan.
That's right.
Right. And then your real dad, and your real dad was in the Air Force as I think he was refueler of some sort, right? He refueled.
He did that, and he was also an air traffic controller.
Right. But your stepdad, Alan, literally was being deployed at different times, off and on, sometimes in Saudi Arabia and other places, and then you guys were moving from place to place. I think what's interesting to me when I read this first part of your book about you as a kid growing up in this home is that you have this immediate gravitation to all things military. I mean, including your love for Star Trek Next Generation episodes. I mean, you clearly have this. I mean, you say it's your upbringing, but there's a part of me that thinks, man, there's something inside you that was calling you at this from a very early age.
I think that's true. I think that there's something a little more atavistic about the military that appeals to men and women, but I think men more specifically, or young boys. And I think you hit the nail on the head. There's something a little extra to it, to the interest. I think it's not enough to. I mean, it's not enough to just kind of have a general interest in the military in order to want to do it. There's got to be something extra. I think there's some little key to the attraction. I think that has to be added in, or just maybe baked into the personality. But yeah, I mean, even like you mentioned Star Trek. I mean, my favorite stuff with Star Trek was always the battle stuff. Think of Wrath of Khan. Like the naval aspect of Star Trek was always the more appealing side for me. And anytime I could see that in some kind of medium, I really latched onto it. Whether it be something direct like Platoon or Top Gun, to something more esoteric or hazy like Star Trek. Or Star Wars for that matter. The rebellion was a huge thing. As a kid, and so yeah. But I do think that you're right, and that there was something extra sort of plugged into my. I think it was both. I think I was immersed in it, and then on top of it, I found a certain kind of atavistic attraction to the experience in general terms.
Well, but then I think it gets even more specific for you because, as you're immersing yourself, the only thing I kept thinking to myself was, my God, this man is called. People will talk about being called into a ministry, right? Or something like that. I mean, it was like you were called. This was what you were called to do. I mean, every part of your being from, listen, I lived in the country, and you described being in Georgia and being out in the country woods and doing what you did. But even as a kid, I lived out in the country. We used to play Army, right? And we used to, sneak through the backwoods and play Army and stuff. We enjoyed it. It was fun. It was different for you. It seemed like everything was tactically laid out for you in a way that this was just going to be a destiny. Because, I mean, when you join CAP, right, the Civil Air Patrol, right, who wants to join Civil Air Patrol and then stand outside the front of their driveway practicing marching drills? I mean, and I'm imagining you doing this, and I'm like going, okay, there's something in the head here. There's something in Jared's head that's gone off that goes, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do.
The dorkiest kid on the block, easily. Easily. Without a doubt. No, I think it was a clumsy calling. I think that I think if it was a little, because I had this, especially as I got older, I started having this notion that, or I started having an interest in not hypocrisy is not the right word, but the some of its slippery sides of it. Vietnam was a really big touchstone for me as a teenager, as I write in the book. And Vietnam is like one of the slipperiest conflicts we've ever been in, probably, Iraq being second to that. And there's something about the ambiguity of it that I really liked. I like the idea of the soldier being against not only the enemy on the battlefield, but also having struggles within the system that he's serving. And there was something kind of strange in that I really latched onto as I got older and began to see even in my own time in the military. I think if it was a clean calling, if it was a more of a pure calling, I would have probably been more of a zealot. I would have been a little bit more, I'd probably still be in the military in some capacity. Right. I think that it would have been it wouldn't have been so muddy. Because it very much was. It was. Now you're right in the sense that I was gonna go that direction no matter what. Like there were other influences that were pulling on me, and I had interest in the arts even when I was younger, but it was always overridden by that drive. And so you're right in the sense that I was going to inevitably end up in that direction. But I think that when I look at it retrospectively, I think that my role there, if I am to make it, add sort of a predestination to this, is like my role there was to observe it, and to come away with maybe a little bit of, I hope, a side door look at what this world is, and then also offer, like, look, kids are doing this. Kids are and not in a negative or positive way. Just say, look, like, this is something that's part of human nature. Like, kids are, we like. There's attraction, especially among boys, for playing in the woods, playing war, just as you did, and I certainly did, and that's something that needs to get. Like, it kind of gets whitewashed or overlooked a little bit. I think kind of gets we don't like to look at it directly because it says something about human nature that might be a little ugly, but I think it's worthy of exploration, certainly.
As you're going through all this, and you've been surrounded, of course, by the military. All your family's been surrounded by the military. But I thought there was this one moment when you're trying to make a decision into which branch of the military you want to go into, and you're thinking Army, and I'm giggling here a little bit because you kind of described the Army recruiter as being a little bit sleazy in terms of a sleazy salesperson, right? And here's to me the beginning of actually some cynicism, if I can throw that in for me, of going, hold it, this isn't what, because you started to really think through this, going, oh, this isn't feel right. I mean, you literally say, and you tried it on and it didn't feel right when you met with her. And she calls you and says, and starts pressing you. And you kind of push back here and go, I want to think about it a little bit.
That recruiter, I remember her, I don't remember her name for the life of me, but I remember her being something of a luckless individual, very kind of lost to the gears of the recruiting world, which is very sales driven. It's very much a quota game. Even in the Marine Corps, it's that way. And Marine Corps just has a tendency to kind of blanket it over so you don't see it as much. But it's still very much a numbers game. It's Glengarry, Glenn Ross there. I mean, that's what's going on. But I think what really got me is I was so stunned that I could show up to the Army and say, look, I want you to put a rifle in my hand and a parachute on my back and let me go jump out of planes with a rifle, and have them turn me down on it. I was really stunned by that. I was like, it was like, wait a minute, I understand. I did fairly well in the ASVAB. I don't think I was an expert at it by any stretch, but I was like, look, I don't care what the ASVAB score says. I know what I'm like. I had this lineage, and I had this I was carrying all this sort of narrative baggage around about all this. I was reading all these books about Chamberlain and the Civil War and guys in World War II and the Battle of Bulge. The Army it was a big centerpiece of a lot of that. And I was like, I'm fascinated with all this. I want to participate in the way that those guys did. And you're telling me I got to go be like a water purification specialist? It just turned me off. It was like, I contemplated military intelligence. They were like, that seemed like an interesting field, but it was not. It also felt a little neutered. I was like, I can't believe this. I'm like, there was this sort of idea, and I say it in the book. There was this idea that only the dregs of the world go into combat arms. That was insulting to me. And it still is now. Some of our best people have come out of combat arms. Some of the best people this country's ever produced have gone into the infantry and gone on to do incredible things.
And you list them. You list them.
Audie Murphy. I mean, you can go forward from there. I mean, look, Adam Driver, the actor, was a Marine infantryman. There's this so this idea that the knuckle draggers end up there was somewhat insulting, and so that really took and then of course there was a high pressure sales tactic of trying to shove me into some sort of other field. Finally I was just I'm out. There's no way I can do this. It felt like in my core wrong to do. It felt like I was being used.
His name is Jerad W. Alexander. The book is outstanding. Volunteers. Let me just say this for those of you listening. And by the way, you're listening on the Jiggy Jaguar Experience. Jerad Alexander has written for Esquire, Rolling Stone, The Nation, Narratively, and elsewhere. He holds an MFA from New York University from 1998 to 2006. He served as a U.S. Marine, deployed to the Mediterranean, East Africa, and Iraq. He grew up on military bases from the east coast of the United States to Japan. He currently lives in New York City. I was especially fun for me because I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and of course, I'm not too far because I go past Lejeune, and I know you were at Lejeune, and your description of Lejeune is so accurate. if you've never been to Camp Lejeune, the number of strip clubs that line the main highway there, I can't even tell you the numbers. The numbers are outrageous, but there are a ton of them for sure.
I was stunned when I learned they closed the Driftwood. I was blown away because it's right outside the main gate.
Right, it's right outside the main gate across the street. Yeah.
And they closed it, I think, a couple of years ago, and I was just floored. I was like, that place has been an institution in that town for, since I was at least well before I was ever in the Marine Corps. So yeah.
Speaking
of the Marine Corps, it didn't happen for you right away. I mean, you got DQ'd.
I did. Yeah. I had issues with my ear. I couldn't hear as well out of my right ear from my left. And, that was a stunner. That was a week-long, like, existential hell. That's what that was. And, that was me just sort of, having a little bit of a panic attack there, because I go in and I go through the process thinking I'm going to be, qualified right out the door and no big deal. And I walk out of that day, saying, with them telling me it was a conditional disqualification, like, my right ear is not up to par. And what was really stunning was the gunnery sergeant who I rode with back and forth to the MEPS, which was in Fort Jackson in Columbia. And he said to me, he goes, I think it's absolutely absurd that they would disqualify in hearing. None of us can hear. And nobody gets kicked out. None of it. As soon as you enter the military, they don't care one whit about your hearing anymore, because they're going to erode it over, especially if you're engineer or combat infantryman or tanker or something that has ordnance around you, you're going to lose your hearing. It's just, you're guaranteed to lose some hearing. So it was a little bit nuts that they would disqualify me on that premise. That was his attitude. And then, of course, a week later, I go back and, they had irrigated my ear, I think, and which improved it a little bit. But I was beaten on that button because he had said something interesting that I thought it added a little wrinkle to the attitude. It added a little wrinkle to my understanding. The very honorable military. He goes, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. And I heard that over and over again at Parris Island, and then later at the School of Infantry. This sort of, just do what you got to do to get to the end of this thing. Like, and so I started thinking, okay, if I just time the trigger on the little button in the hearing booth and all, and that's what I ended up doing sort of loosely fooling the test enough to get all they needed to see was an improvement, and they got it, and just enough, and I was through the door, and I went outside and like huge sigh of relief, and I was singing all sorts of praises on the way back.
But see, this story is significant for me, at least, when I read the book, because, again, it's one more layer of cynicism that I see build upon the story, that you're going, okay, first of all, your real dad is not in favor of the Marines at all. Like, your grandfather on your mom's dad doesn't want you to go into the military at all. And then, of course, then you go Marine, and your mom, who is, evidently by what you describe her, was cool with it. At least she was going to be cool with it. And your stepdad was they both were kind of like, well, at least they're honorable. And so you're going there. But there's this, I keep hearing in the story this thing of, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Go ahead.
Right. There was this sort of like, I have struggles with stories that are inherently completely negative on the military or completely positive, because I think that when you eject one side of that, you immediately become false. And so I wanted to make sure that I was trying. I also think the more mundane is the wrong word, but the more specific and experience, the more universal it tends to be.
Right.
And one of the things that we don't get a lot of, I think, in the literature of wartime is the minutia. And not just like minutia in war, like the minutia of being in the military. Like, you used to see that a lot. If you look back at look old literature from World War I and II, you saw the enlistment process. They took you through the drafting, and they took you through the first iterations of training, and then into the combat zone. Well, that's I feel like that's been lost a little bit. And I wanted to show like something like MEPS, which is like because every time I would go and do something like this for the official organ of the military, there was a kind of sloppiness to it sometimes. It was a very bureaucratic and lower level government muddiness to it. There was a kind of, you could feel that it was a machine, and it was a clumsy one and clunking, and you could get lost in it. You know, I felt that very much. And I'm not really, I'm not interested in making a pro-government or anti-government statement necessarily. It's just that's just kind of how I felt at the moment. Was like I got there, and the Marine Corps, for all its merits, has a tendency to oversell itself, and they were really hyping up the sort of honor and glory, and you get to the title of Marine and all that, and then when you get in there, you realize that there's some truth to it, and they do kind of live up to that to a certain degree, but at the same time, there's a kind of pipeline to it as well. And I wanted to show that a little, at least in shades, that every little bit of it has a caveat or an asterisk above it, you know. And for example, boot camp, you know, they always say you earn the title of Marine at the end of boot camp, and that's fantastic. The attrition rate of boot camp is not the super. It's not really all that high. It seems like it is, but it's not. That's because they need Marines. They need people to go through this and fill out the services. It's not like the officers. Officers, when they go to officer candidate school, can quit at any time, and they encourage it because they don't want anybody who doesn't want to be there. Boot camp for the enlisted, you don't have that luxury. You're there, and you're going to finish it. And if you get dropped, you're going to get dropped, and it's going to be consequences to that administratively and legally. So, you know, I want to just throw those things in there to try to unravel some of the lore, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think, and I think what people need to understand is that in this book is that you take such a balanced view of it, because you do say, while you're in boot camp, I was taught brotherhood and camaraderie, told about Marines who gave their all, about teamwork and selfless sacrifice for the greater good, about virtues and core values, honor, courage, commitment. I was taught motivation, dedication, and how to have a positive mental attitude. And then you talk about, I think it's your drill sergeant Wilkinson and the other drill instructors called the outside the world, Marine Corps, the real world, as if what we were doing was somehow so bizarre, unusual, and spectacular. And I started to think about that, and what I kept thinking was, you know, you're not disparaging what you're doing here, but you're giving us kind of a reality. This is a reality check, folks. This is. I did learn a lot, but at the same time, there was a lot of stuff here that, looking back on it, or at that time, I kind of started questioning myself, going, "Okay, I'm not sure this is everything that I thought it was going to be."
Right. You know, and one of the things about Marine boot camp, specifically as it relates to the recruiting, is they never told you what it came after. You never got any. There was no brochure that says, "Look, you're going to go spend 3.5 years at Camp Lejeune," because and they can't do that.
Right.
Do that, you know, like, because they would lose so many people. Like, you're going to go sit in a cinder blocks barracks for 4 years and get yelled at by a drunk corporal. Like that's not going to bode well, you know. Like I'd have been a little. I probably still would have done it, but I think I would have been like, okay. It would have given me a little bit more another story to tell, quite frankly. But you're right. I mean, it's there. It had to have both. I couldn't just drag the military, you know, through the mud. No. Yeah, because it just wouldn't have been fair, and it wouldn't have been accurate. But I also can't sing his praises 100% either. You know, I think that, I really tried to find this, like, right down the line, just this. Like, because that's what I was taught in boot camp. Like, all the things you just mentioned and just read from, it was everything that I was taught. But then I offered counterpoint to that later. You know, the woman who's like, "You're not even really a Marine," you know, like that lance corporal, you know, who after I'd come out of boot camp, you know, and I would offer examples to show, like, maybe that wasn't really that accepted of a reality from most Marines. Like, I didn't have room in the book to talk about my first year. Like, being a new guy in an infantry company is a unique, and it was the most unique experience I've ever had in the military, because it was incredibly fast, it was really intense, and it was one of the most, like, socially awkward in times of my life, quite frankly. And there was a lot of those little caveats to what the narrative was that's really important and really specific. I talk about running into Wilkinson, you know, about a year later, you know, and how much I'm just like, you're not even a real person to me anymore. You know, like you're from some other world,
Right.
You know, at that, he's from another world. I felt embarrassed about it. I still am, because he was trying to just have a connection with me, and I was very much like, nah, man, like I can't have these two worlds colliding like this, because it's
right.
down, you know.
I think that's the thing that keeps coming back. Maybe that's what it is in this book, is that there's this, the real world, which is outside of the Marines, and then there's this Marine world, and it seems like that you are caught somewhere in between it in your mind, and that it's like, I mean, even when you talk about Jen in the book and your relationship with her, there's this, and she wants more from you, you know, and you're about to be deployed, and you know, there's this, you could feel the tension. At least for me, I could sense the tension of going, you know, I'm not so sure that I really want to do this. And yet I know this is something, you know, because Ken, my best buddy, you know, who's now a mercenary, right, for all intents and purposes, right, is out doing the stuff that you want to do, and you're not, and there's this whole, and it just feels like conflict to me within your own mind.
There was a lot. Well, there's a lot of anxiety. You know, I think that word alone makes up a lot of my feelings in my last 2 or 3 years in the military. It was just a general sense of anxiety. You know, until I got orders to Iraq, that's what encompassed my. That's how I felt, especially after 9/11. It was just, how is this going to play out, and am I going to be allowed to be a part of it?
Right.
But at the same time, I had all these sort of outside influences pulling me in other directions that were very, very, that were really good, Jen being one of them, you know, and so I had all these sort of like, I remember I had a friend of mine, he said, like, look, you know, going to war is not really in the end all be all. I said, what did I just do here? And I explained to him, like, I just spent 8 years of I'll spent 8 years of my life in this thing in a wartime, and I'm leaving it to not have that experience seems like a complete waste.
Right.
Like it would have been 8 years of my life that I have just expended for nothing. And that's how I felt about it at the time. And I expressed that to Ken, you know. But also, to your question about conflict, your point about conflict, it's true in that I was, even while I wanted very much to be in the Marine Corps when I enlisted, or I wanted to be in the military and at that forward edge, I was still very much a civilian. Like I was sort of ingesting what I was seeing, but not adopting it all the way. I would go to high school friends when they went out to college. I would go to their college towns, Athens being predominantly one of them in Georgia, and I would hang out with them, and they would be surprised to find out that I was in the Marine Corps. You know, I've had more people as an older individual see the military in me than when I was in the Marine Corps, which is really strange because I definitely don't carry myself that way now. You know,
Right.
You know, very much. I've been out of the military longer than I was ever in it, and so. But I was very much sort of a reluctant Marine, but unconsciously reluctant. I didn't really like. I didn't go up to my nose in it. You know, I kind of kept a little bit of a distance from some of its attitudes and behaviors. I didn't lose myself in it. At least I tried not to. And I think that sort of created a conflict in itself.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful. I mean, because I think that's what makes this book just so real, right? This isn't about, you know, this isn't about a bunch of war stories here and there. I mean, you do give us some battle pieces in, you know, front of every chapter, but that's not what it is. This is about I think, to me, the beautiful part of this book is it's the reality of your own emotional, mental, physical, spiritual growth and feelings of this as you're moving through, you know, from the time of childhood to this career that you had, you know, in the Marines. I got to bring up the Hotel 13. Okay, so Hotel 13. I'm just going to read you the first line and I'll let you run. The sailor ruined the funeral. You've got to tell the story because it's hilarious. I couldn't stop laughing as soon as I read the story because the story is just a great way to start that 13th chapter.
So this is a story that it basically is designed to erode some of the attitudes we have about military and its ceremony. I was part of a funeral detail for about 2 months. It was like an on-call job where, we would get a phone call, we'd have to show up and go off, take vans off somewhere in the Piedmont area of North Carolina and, be the body bearer and rifle team for a funeral of a veteran. And we did it probably about a half dozen, maybe up 10 times, I think, over those 2 months, or at least the 1 month that we were on the active side of it. And this one early on, we had trained. We would rehearse, 2 or 3 times a week, and the woman in charge of it was a really nice sergeant, and she really wanted a real bugle or a trumpeter, somebody who, I'm thinking Robert E. Lee Pruitt from Here to Eternity, somebody who can stand out there and belt taps and know what he's doing with that trumpet. She scoured Camp Lejeune. She goes to the Marine band, the 2nd Marine Division band. Well, they're too busy playing Xboxes or whatever because they just couldn't be bothered to commit, and which I wasn't terribly surprised at. And I don't want to drag the band too much, but I thought that was a little shallow of them. So she kept looking, and eventually she stumbled across this sailor. I don't know how, but she found a sailor who worked at the Naval Hospital. And he was young. He couldn't have been maybe 20, 21. He was like a seaman apprentice. It took 2-striper, and I don't remember what his rating was. But we pick him up. So we get called to his funeral. We pick him up sight unseen. She didn't think I don't think she actually met the kid. But prior to a funeral, she just took it on faith that the kid knew what he was doing. And we go get him. We drive. We doesn't really talk much. We don't really engage with him too much. We go to a funeral in Jacksonville. We plant him up on a little knoll in the cemetery. And I was in charge of the rifle detail. So, we do the whole thing. I have the squad fire their 3 rounds. And then his responsibility is to start going. And he butchers taps. It's honks, it's beeps, it's he's spitting. It's an absolute disaster. Like it's something out of like it's like a deleted scene from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas or something. It's like I'm losing my mind, like because I find that thing even in the moment of a ceremony like that, I would find that kind of thing absolutely hilarious. I'm looking at where I'm standing. I can see under the tent where the family is gathered, and they're crestfallen. They're just it's a horror show. Like they just had their wits terrified by these 7 M16s firing, and now they're hearing the beeps and bonks of this idiot, trying to play taps. Oh my Lord! I don't know how he made it out of that cemetery. To be frank with you, I'm surprised they didn't plant him in the ground right there. But we got him back, and boy, we couldn't give him too much of a hard time. We did immediately. We were like, "What is wrong with you? Why? What did they find you? What spare parts of people do they put together to create you?" But the gunny, the sergeant, she was really like, "Don't, let's leave him alone. I'll deal with it." I don't know what she said to the man, but that was the last we ever saw of him. And from then on, we just used this little box. It was this little round device that you plant inside of a trumpet or a bugle, and the person just stands up there and holds it to their lips.
Oh my gosh.
It's got a timer on it. You push the button, so you would surreptitiously push the button right before they're about to do it, and then bring it up to the lips, and then it would just play. And I just remember feeling like how incredibly cheap. And it worked every time, mind you.
Right.
It was a perfect piece of gear for it, but I remember thinking, gosh, how incredibly cheap that this is where we are. Like, we can't find a guy to play trumpet for, like...
Right.
And it made me think a lot about, like, the meaning of this sort of thing, and, like, what we're actually celebrating, and if this is just more of a formality than anything real, and who, what about the person we're honoring? Are they living up to some sort of standard that this whole ceremony is designed to represent? But yeah, it was, I had been asked to actually cut that early on in the editing process, and I flat refused. I was like, that has to stay in.
No, it has to, because it adds to that layer. Again, I think it adds to that layer of going, this isn't what they tell you in the recruiting. Canty didn't tell me that in the recruiting process.
Right.
Right.
Although I think Canty would have laughed his tail off if he had. I think he would have. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but I think that he would have found that sad and yet also like on brand, as they say.
Right.
Yeah.
I just found that to be. I just found it to be another layer. I have taken way over your time that you've allotted. You have been amazing as a guest. I've really enjoyed my time chatting with you through this book. Folks, the book, you really need to get this book. I'm just telling you, the book is entitled Volunteers, Growing Up in a Forever War by Jerad Alexander. It is a memoir, but it's more than that. It really does give you an inside look at literally one man's perspective of growing up in a military family and then exiting the military and everything that he mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually goes through in terms of his own journey. And it is a beautiful journey. I cannot recommend this book more. You will shake your head. You will laugh. You will cry. You'll get a little angry. At times too. I can promise you that. It just runs the full gamut of emotions. Get the book, available Amazon, bookstores near you. Volunteers, Growing Up in the Forever War, Jerad Alexander. Jerad, thank you again for your service, and thank you for indulging me in a little bit of the book. I hope you enjoyed the interview.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been fun for me too, so I really appreciate you. James?
I'll tell you, you hit it out of the park, Jay. As always. Jerad, thanks for doing this, brother. Is there
this is fun.
But besides the book, is there any way we can correspond with you on social media or websites or anything?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm on Twitter at Jerad, is Jerad is my first name, _Alexander. That's one way to get at me on Twitter. I also have a website at jaradalexander.com as well.
Fantastic.
Hey, Jerad, are you on LinkedIn at all?
I do have a LinkedIn profile, yes.
If I send you a request, will you take it?
Yeah. Why not? Yeah, I don't see why not. Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that. I can beg if that makes it.
That's all right. Not at all.
No, it's awesome. I really seriously, I really enjoyed it. So yeah, look for me to connect with you there.
All right, yeah, I look forward to it.
Awesome. James?
Well, thank you, Jerad. Thank you, Jay. And this has been fantastic. And I guess before we let you go, Jay, mention your show and books and everything. Yeah.
So, hey, folks, the show's called A New Direction. I interview best-selling authors from all over the world on leadership and success. We have a great line of shows. We're in over 90 countries. We're coast to coast on radio also, so you can find us on some radio stations coast to coast as well. I'm also a coach, and I do coaching in leadership success and performance coaching, and that's called Coaching Mavericks. And so if you want to learn more, you can go to coachingmavericks.com. No suits, no bull, just results. That's what we are about. And so we'd love to have you do that. You can find me on all the social media. Instagram, Jay Izzo, that's IZSO. Internet Doctor on Twitter and Facebook, and Jay Izzo on LinkedIn as well. I'm happy to connect with you, so please reach out. Let me know that you've heard me on the Jiggy Jaguar show.
Well, this has been fun. Jerad, thanks for doing this, brother. We definitely have to do this again because the book is amazing. You've got so many great ideas on different things. And Jay, once again, I always love it when we have a guest on, when you fill in for somebody or you co-host with me, that you can really tell that Jay loved the book because he's excited about it. Because there's been a few times we've had some people on, and I've in the very beginning when I would just throw Jay into a conversation with people, and you could clearly tell that he was doing a good job, but he could have cared less about the book. And it is so night and day.
Give away the trade secret, brother. You're throwing me under the bus, and then you.
I don't want to break kayfabe on Jay Izzo, but thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jared, and I will talk to you guys soon. Appreciate it, guys.
Take care.
All right.
Thank you much. There they go. That is Jerad Alexander. That is Jay Izzo. And that wraps it up here from our big broadcast. We are live, coast to coast and border to border on iHeartRadio. Thanks for joining us, and we will inevitably